Hey, Rich, Jesse Homestead. How the heck are you? Today's video is going to be about fencing. Yeah. Especially, I'd had a subscriber had a question, and they're wanting to go multi-species. I think the only thing he didn't mention in that comment was chickens. And I'm sure they're on the agenda for later. And what type of fencing would be best and how to set it up. And I thought it'd be a lot easier to answer this in a short video as anything else. But I wanted to get, I'm starting to kick off for subscribers. Yeah. I want to take my little bitty channel and like explode it out to 50,000 people instantly, almost overnight. That takes some doing, folks. Yeah. So I was looking around at ways to do that. And I came up with a couple and really put a comment and let me know which one you think I should go with. But I really think this might work. Seriously. So let me point them out to you and see what you think. So my first idea was to go with something, kind of patriotic kind of thing. Freedom isn't free, help a vet out, all those kind of different things. And, guys have done that in the past, and it just it just didn't work out all that well. So I was looking at current events and how folks are responding to it, and what is the one thing that would motivate most folks to really get involved with a subscription drive. And you know what? I really do think I found it. That's what I'm going to make my 50,000 subscriber giveaway. I know, that was mean, wasn't it? But I figured it would be a good motivating factor this day and age. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. What do you think that would be a duffer if I'm going to have to, go empty out another sweet old lady's cart as she's rolling out of the grocery store to get more. But I figured it'd be a motivator. Well, now, if anything, that'd get somebody up, out trying to circulate some folks for me. I know, anyway. We're going to deal with fencing. I have a subscriber who is going to be using a lot of multi-species and livestock, and he was primarily concerned about his perimeter fencing because of they're close to town, and I guess have an elementary school very close. Okay, so he wants kids to be safe and not grab a hold of a hot wire and get lit up. So that's kind of what this is going to be about. I'm going to show some different styles of fence and make some recommendations to him of what I would say, not knowing what his budgets are and so forth. Something he's going to have to look at. But also teach him how to train his pigs. Yeah, a lot of folks don't understand. You need to train your pigs. Okay, so we'll go into a little advanced pig training and then take it from there. So let's get started. A lot of this will be some pictures and all that kind of stuff, so we'll have fun with it. So, let's get this show on the road, man. Okay, folks, let's start talking some fencing here. Two primary functions of fencing: keeping your livestock on your property, and keeping other critters that you may not want on your property off of your property. First step: check and see if there are any state fencing laws. Okay? It can become a real hassle to go out and spend a lot of money on fencing just to find out that it has violated the law. Okay? Primary thing, number one, keep your animals on your land. You really do keep good relations with your neighbors. But the second thing is keeping animals and predators and making it very inconvenient for somebody to steal your livestock is as far as protecting your livestock from those kind of threats. Now, needless to say, you can't protect against everything. All right, a fence just isn't going to do that. And I've seen a situation where we had a mountain lion show up down south and was stealing calves, and they were leaving nothing behind. I mean, nothing behind. But you can go out and do a search, and you're going to find all kinds of bizarre things that happen to livestock out in pastures. So if they're better protected from these happenings, then you're going to have a better chance keeping your livestock happy and healthy. So, not to scare anybody or anything, but seriously, stuff happens out there. So protection is something you want to consider. And that's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of cattle panels. One, that little furry guy you're looking at right now with the horns, these guys are escape artists. All right? Now, I can tell you that firsthand. They can climb a lot of fences you wouldn't think they could climb. Barbed wire doesn't really slow them down much. Okay? So they can get a little interesting. But if you put in a good cattle panel, and there's two ways you can really do this. You can use wood posts all the way around, and that can get a little expensive. Or you can use, like I always used, would be a wooden post every 16 foot. And that allowed you to put your cattle panel up and attach the ends to the wooden post. And then I'd go in with 2 T-bars posts spaced out. That'd give the the support in the center. So you're saving quite, I guess the last time I bought some wood posts, you're talking about $7-8 a post, depending on the area you're in. And that will keep you from having to, spend extra on the wood posts. It's a great thing to do if you got the money, but like I said, the biggest thing is to get those cattle panels up. Goats don't climb them real well, and if they do, you can always add a little strip of barbed wire up at the top of it to deter them. But cattle panels are really the best general livestock fencing. It also makes it extremely hard for things like wild dogs, coyotes, wolves, things of that nature to get into your livestock. And during like calving season or birthing season, that becomes really important. When you're, if you got goats or sheep or cattle, whenever they start birthing, stand by because it can get pretty interesting. Because the smell is in the air and it draws in predators because they know that they've got a baby calf out there somewhere. But like I said, the cattle panels are a little bit more expensive than going with, say, a barbed wire fence or something of that nature. I'm not a big fan of the roll fences. I have seen especially if you're dealing with goats, I have seen them scale those little suckers, go up them like a ladder. But that's also another way that could be utilized. If you're not worried about going up against, and money's an issue, then barbed wire is a good way to go. You can go with a 5-wire barbed wire, intermix that in with some electrified wire, or poly wire is the one I prefer, and you can have a good fence for containment of your animals. Okay, it's not going to do much to keep the predators out. Now that's the difference, but it will keep your animals fairly happy, healthy, and at home. If you check your state laws on fencing laws, you may find out that some states frown on barbed wire, some states do not. Here in Tennessee, if you get a copy of the Tennessee fencing laws, you'll get to chuckle because technically, until an animal has escaped off of your property 3 times into a neighbor's property, the state views, and by law, that other owner, let's say they've built a subdivision close by you and your cows went in and grazed on their flower beds, they're responsible. They have to take care of keeping, if they don't want your animals in their yard, then they need to put up an appropriate fence to keep your animals out. Now, you'd want to be a good neighbor if you had a cow get out and tear up somebody's garden to pay for the damages and so forth, and try to treat them nicely on the thing. But if they get, like I had one guy had a cow get out and it got into his flower bed, and he was talking about suing, he was talking about this, he was talking about that. And I burned a copy of the Tennessee fence law, and I went back over to him and said, I'm willing to replace your flowers and stuff. I don't have a problem with that. But here's the law, and no, you can sue me if you want, but I'll probably be countersuing you for attorney's fees because you don't really have a case here. And kind of went on about my business. So know that your laws are there for a reason. Now, the next thing you're going to want to look at is if you incorporate either electric fencing or polywire or something of that nature in with both cattle panels and with barbed wire. On cattle panels, I like to use, especially if I'm in an area where I'm worried about somebody reaching through the fence and grabbing hold of that wire, I'll go ahead and put, they make extensions, different sizes that you can nail right to the post, or they also have them that clip to T-posts that hold the wire out away from your fence. That will keep the animal off of that fence, which is a good thing because especially with large animals, they like to press on fences. They like to kind of push against them. They're looking for weak links because that grass just on the other side of that fence looks so much better. So that's another way to help kind of secure your fencing up, is to run a single strand of polywire or maybe even a double strand along the sides. Now, when you're talking about, if you're planning on using your polywire for cross fencing for paddock control, it works out great because then you're not, you've got, if you went around your perimeter fencing with a single strand or a double strand of wire, you can just hook your polywire as you run it across straight to that, and you're instantly energized. So it makes running that sort of stuff a lot easier. But, what I would do 9 times out of 10 is make sure that my fencing is good, that whether you choose a barbed wire fence, the roll fencing, or if you're doing roll fencing, man, make sure you stretch that stuff tight, maybe get a stretcher and put it on the back of your tractor, or the cattle panels. Cattle panels are probably the most expensive way to go, but I got to tell you, in the long run, it's going to just save you a fortune. Now, when you get into your cross fencing with your polywires, it depends on what kind of mix of animals you're using. If you're dealing with cattle and calves, you can get away with, if they're, depending on the size of the animal you have at the pasture at the time, you can run a single strand of polywire across your paddock. I liked the hook-topped metal poles that are coated in vinyl that you just step in. I have done the little plastic ones. Some guys say they're just fine. I have found that if a deer or something bumps into those or pulls on your wire during the winter, they're awful brittle, and it does snap off a lot of your posts. Where the metal ones, you can just straighten them back up, put them right back in the ground. They're a little bit more expensive. Well, probably you're looking at $2 to $3 a step-in post, but you don't need a heck of a lot of them, especially for cattle. You can also get the little twist-on clips, and with those you can just twist those things on and run 2-3 strands across there that'll contain even the. Alrighty. I have found Premier Fencing to be a very good supplier. Their prices are pretty reasonable, and their quality of their product is very good. One thing you're going to want to keep in mind, if you're going to be running, as far as your goats, you can just run a double or triple strand of polywire across the paddock, and that will usually contain adult goats. As long as your perimeter fencing's not bad, you've got good perimeter fencing that would contain a goat, then you're not going to have a problem with them. Even if they get under the polywire, they will make their way back to mama when they need to. But when it comes to the netting, if you're going to use netting for both the goats and pigs, always remember, a goat can jump pig netting. Not a problem, and they figured out pretty quickly. So if you're going to be running like pigs and goats and sheep and so forth together, sheep I've not dealt a lot with them, so I'm not an expert. But a goat will jump the shorter pig netting. Kind of keep that in mind. So you might want to be, if you're going to be running those two together, uh, you might want to go ahead and go with the goat netting for that. Otherwise, if you're running your goats in with your cattle, just run 3 strands of polywire across your paddock and you should be good. So, and that's a pretty simple thing to do, honestly. But yeah, perimeter fence is going to be your most important and your most expensive way to go. Like I said, I always like running at least one line of polywire around my perimeter fence. If you're running goats, put it at goat height. That will keep them from trying to climb on that fence. Cows don't much care for trying to climb a cattle panel. They just won't mess with it. So, as far as I'm concerned, the best fencing to have, and when you're looking at fencing, you're looking at long term. Okay? You truly are. Put up cheap fencing, you're going to be putting up cheap fencing again in a few years. It's worth the extra investment to go ahead and put in a good, high quality, especially your perimeter fence, a good, high quality perimeter fence. It's going to save you a lot of work, time, effort, the whole shooting match. Goats, like I said, keep in mind, these guys are little escape artists, and if your fencing is in good shape, your perimeter fencing, even if they get through a polywire, they've moved up into another paddock ahead of time, it's not that big of a deal. And these guys do love to climb, so you might want to provide that for them. Alrighty, let's talk about pig training. Any animal that you bring on your farm, if you've got any horse sense at all, you're going to quarantine them for at least a couple of weeks. I always did it for 30 days. Keep them out of the rest of your livestock, because they could be packing some sort of disease that hasn't totally came into fruition yet. And by the time if you've stuck them out there in your pasture with your other livestock, by the time you discover it, congratulations, now you've got every animal on your farm affected with it. So you always want to quarantine them anyway. But with pigs, that's a great time for training them to polywire. Pigs will charge forward when they're shocked. Most other animals will back away from that fence. A pig will not. If it's not used to polywire, it's going to follow its natural instincts, and it's going to run forward with everything it's got. Okay? And the more it gets shocked, the harder it runs. It will yank your entire fence down, tear it up, drag it into the next county. Okay? So they have to be trained to it. And what I found really works out well is build yourself, depending on how many pigs you've got to contain, build yourself a corral, you might say, out of cattle panels. You can use shorter ones. You can buy some cattle panels if you need to save some money and cut them in half and so forth. They're about 4 foot high, but you're going to want something that's solid. Okay, drive in your T-bar posts, put up a corral made of cattle panels. Inside that is where you put your polywire. So what's going to happen if that pig is not trained to polywire? It's going to hit that wire, it's going to try to run forward, and it's going to immediately run into a solid fence. It doesn't take it very long to figure out, I need to back up. And it's going to do that a few times, okay? But it will quickly learn that when it feels that shock, put it in reverse, not in drive, okay? Because the natural instinct for a pig is, if it gets shocked, is to run forward with every ounce of energy it has. And that will play havoc on your fence, can even play havoc on your chargers. Okay, so always do that. And if you just ask the guy that's selling you the pigs, is your pig trained polywire, and you don't see any out there, assume he's saying yes just to get the pig sold. Okay? Go ahead, and it makes a great quarantine facility. Put them in that pen for a while. That way you can check, they're confined, you can check in closely on them, and they're getting trained to the polywire at the same time. And then if you're not in the process of training new pigs, you can always take and utilize that cattle panel somewhere else, or you can take your poly wire out and just, put it out there in the field. Usually, Mama will help the youngsters understand poly wire is not a good thing. And so, it's like they pass that along. So be advised, though, pigs will always charge forward without hesitation. So you want to make sure that that's taken care of. I wish I could tell you a shorter way to do it, but that's the only way I know of. Now, if you have a way to go ahead and if you've got like a good solid wood pen that your pigs can't charge through, you can go ahead and use that. But other than that, well, cattle panels work real good. Okay, to kind of wrap this thing up, let's talk just a minute. As far as I've seen, your money and your time is well invested to put up the best possible perimeter fence you can afford to do. It's just going to save you a lot of man hours, a lot of headaches, and a lot of expense farther on down the road, because it does, fences does wear out. If you're going to go with a cattle panel fence, I would go ahead and space that up off a ground level. You see a lot of people putting it right down on the dirt. It's just going to cause the bottom of that to rust out over time. Take it up just a little bit, and they hold up real well, and it's not quite as hard on your weed eating around that fence. If you've got, an inch or so underneath that, you can go through there and buzz underneath that fence with a weed eater. I used to have an old push around string trimmer, which was really nice. Adjusted it down to where the string went right underneath the fence, and I could just push it right down the row and done with it. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Your perimeter fencing is one of the things you don't want to cut your corners on. Okay, that you're going to have to live with for a lot of years. I mean, a lot of years. And if you put up cheap, you're going to pay the price, not only in added materials, but the time and energy and work that's going to create going back and constantly repairing a fence that an animal's leaned against and stretched it out of shape and so forth. I'm not a big fan of the roll fencings, especially if you're going to have cattle out there. If you put a long enough extension to hold the poly wire out there to keep them off the fence, it'd probably do okay. But cattle will get up against it, lean against it. Like I said, to a cow, that grass is always so much better just on the other side of that fence, so they're going to try to press against it. If you're running poly wire around your perimeter fence, I would encourage you, and you can get it at most places that sell fencing or sell electrical fencing, you will be able to get small signs that you can hang on your fences warning that the fence is electrified. I would do that as a precaution just to make sure that I don't run into any headaches from somebody reaching through a fence and getting bit. I like the poly wire because it is a pulsating current. It's not like somebody's going to get wrapped up in it and get electrocuted. So that's a plus to the poly wire. The downside of the poly wire, especially on your paddock areas, if you're running goats and so forth where you're running netting, a deer get tangled up in that, they'll make a mess of it. I'll tell you that right now. And you'll be out there straightening out a lot of fencing and chasing down the animals all over your paddocks that are out running around. Just make sure your perimeter fence is good and tight. You should be fine with that. At least you'll know where they are. So anyway, hopefully that answered your questions. Like I said, fencing, go with the best you can afford, and in the long run, you'll be happy you did, because it's going to save you a lot of work, headaches, and hassles. So anyway, this is Red Tennessee Homestead. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Take care.